Rabotai, we are continuing on Masechet Avodah Zarah, and we left off on the Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph, by 2 dots, 3 lines down from the wide lines. Yom HaLedah v'Yom HaMitah. In other words, in the Mishnah we mentioned that the day that the king celebrates the birthday of himself, his son, or the yortzeit, so to speak, of a king, will be considered also a day of Avodah Zarah, at least the Yom HaMitah, not the yortzeit, but the actual funeral process that will be considered also a day of Avodah Zarah. So says the Gemara, Michlal de Rabbi Meir Savar, Lo shna mitah sheyesh ba srefa, v'lo shna mitah she'en ba srefa, palchi ba la'avodat kochavim, because the Mishnah mentioned the machloket between Rabbi Meir and Chachamim, and Rabbanan, and Rabbi Meir does not differentiate between a day that they do the Avodah Zarah, when they have Serefa leBelachim, and a day that they don't have Avodah Zarah. In any case that they, if they have, they burn for the king, or they don't, always there is Avodah Zarah, and it will be Asur. So says the Gemara something very interesting. Palchi ba la'avodat kochavim, alma serefa lo laf chukahi. You see from here, the burning for a king is not a chok of the kochavim. In other words, when a king dies and they have a funeral process for him, do you have to have halachically, in the halachot of the goyim, a serefa, and means that they bring all the belongings, the personal belongings of the king, and they burn it? Or is it not a chukah? Is it a chok of the Avodah Zarah to burn all the belongings of the king, or is it not a chukah? Or is it not a rule of a halachic process for the goyim to burn for the king? So says the Gemara, Michlal Rabbanan Sabri Serefa Chukai. You see from here that the Chachamim who disagree with Rabbi Meir, they hold that Serefa, the burning for the king, is a chukah, is a halacha for the goyim to burn for a king all of his belongings to show kavod to the king. So says the Gemara, ve'i chukai, ve'hatanya sorfin ala melachim, ve'lav midarkei emori. We say in the Braita that you could burn the personal belongings of a Jewish king or even a Nasi, as we will see in the Gemara. When someone chashuv dies, you could bring all of their personal belongings and burn it, and that's not considered darkei emori. So says the Gemara, wait a second, ve'i chukahi, but if it is a halacha for the goyim that they burn the belongings of a king, how in the world is that mutar to do for a Jewish king or for a Nasi? The Braita says it's not darkei emori. That's not considered darkei emori. Now there are 2 things that are mentioned in the pasuk. One is darkei emori, and the other one is chukot akum. That according to many, this is one and the same. There are those who differentiate between them. The Stipler Gaon differentiates between the 2. But for our practical purpose of the sugya, we'll assume that they are the one and the same for now, right? The pasuk says, "Kemaaseh eres Mitzrayim asher yeshavtem ba lo ta'asu." Don't do like the actions of Egyptians that you lived amongst them. And don't do like the pathways, like what the Canaanites do, that I'm bringing you there to Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan. Do not go in their laws. So it's a specific isur midoraita not to follow the chukot of the goyim. So says the Gemara, if you tell me that burning the belongings of a king is a chok for goyim, so how is it mutar for us to do a chok of goyim? It says bechukoteim lo telechu. If they have a halacha that whenever a king dies, you bring all of their personal belongings and you burn them, How in the world that becomes mutar now to do it for a yid? Right? Fair enough of a question. Right? So says the Gemara. Gemara answers the following. Now pay attention. The Gemara could have easily answered, I will come back to why the Gemara doesn't do that. The Gemara could have easily answered that we find a pasuk that talks about Tzidkiyahu, about one of the kings, and it says, "B'mesrafot avotecha tisaref, or yisarfu lecha," that you will be respected, you will not be killed with a sword, it says the pasuk, and they will eulogize you properly, and they will have a proper funeral with burning all of your personal belongings, just like they did for your fathers, the kings prior to you. So you see, the pasuk says this minhag of burning the belongings of a king. The Gemara could have, should have, would have answered that right now. So what do you mean that it should be chukot akum? It says it in the pasuk. So however you're going to figure out why it's mutar, it should be mutar, right? That would be a fair answer. The Gemara doesn't do that. The Gemara says, Ela chashivuta, it's not chok for Avodah Zarah. This is not a rule of the goyim, but it is rather a kavod that they give to some people only if they are chashuv. In other words, it's not that every king that dies, our religion, pagan religion, would be to burn their belongings. It's not a chok, it's not a halacha. It depends. If you have a very beloved big king, and everyone is feeling the loss of a king, then they bring his personal belongings, and then they burn him to show, it's a reason behind it, to show that nobody could fit the shoes of this king. Nobody could sit on a horse that this king sat on, or a chariot that he used. En lanu temurato. We don't have a replacement for this king. But if it's a king that's not so chashuv, they wouldn't do that. So it's not halacha, but it's a hanhaga. It's something that they do for an important king. So says the Gemara, so what's the machlokes Rabbi Meir and Chachamim? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Meir savar lo shna mita sheyesh basrefa, lo shna mita she'en basrefa. Says Rabbi Meir, doesn't make a difference what type of funeral it is. Even those funerals that you don't have the burning ceremony of all the belongings of the king, you still have Avodah Zarah. Always, by every king's funeral, you have Avodah Zarah, and therefore, on a day of funeral of a king, you can't do business with the goyim because it's a day of Avodah Zarah. Has nothing to do with burning. Chachamim say no. Rabbanan savri mita shesh basrefa chashiva upalchiba, shem basrefa lo chashiva velo palchiba. Say Chachamim, only when you have a big funeral, those ones who have the burning ceremony, that's the one that they do Avodah Zarah. Regular, Joe Shmo king, they don't have a burning ceremony and they don't have Avodah Zarah. They just bury the guy and celebrate the next guy coming up, and that's it. So says the Gemara, Gufa. Now, let's finish this, and I want to go back to Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, which will be a lot of trouble to put that together with this Gemara, and then maybe we discuss a little bit of a machlokes Rishonim, which really have a bearing on our day and age of what would be asur, what would not be asur, living in America, with all the pagan background of this country and all the Goyish holidays that we have, something important. So says the Gemara, let's first finish this before we go to Sanhedrin. Gufa. We just said that you could burn the belongings of a Jewish king, and that's not the Isur of Darkei Mori, right? That's what we just said. So says the Gemara, Shneimar b'shalom tamut, u'b'misrafot avotecha melachim yisarfu lecha. The pasuk says about Tzidkiyahu, as we mentioned before. It says, "B'shalom tamut u'b'misrafot avotecha melachim rishonim asher hayu lefanecha ken yisrefu lecha ve'ho yadon yispedu lecha ki davar ani dibarti neum Hashem." That's the full pasuk in Yirmiyahu Perek Lamed Dalet, speaking about Tzidkiyahu. So says the Gemara, you see over here that from the time of Nevi'im, the Yirmiyah Navi, giving a good news to Tzidkiyahu. It says, you will die with kavod, and they will burn all of your personal belongings. So you see that this is not considered Darkei Mori. It's not just the kings, but you do it also for Nesi'im, for a Nasi. And the Gemara brings a detailed item-based detail of what they burn. U'ma'em sorfim ala melachim mitatan v'klei tashmishan. You burn their bed, you burn all of their personal belongings. And says the Gemara, Maaseh shemet Rabban Gamliel HaZaken. When the first Rabban Gamliel HaZaken passed away, Kulus Hager, that we just had his story in the previous daf, Kulus Hager, Saraf alav shiv'im manesuri. He burned 70 manesuri. Each one is 100 zuz, so 7,000. That's why I say is what? He burned 7,000 zuz? You don't burn money. You burn the personal belongings. So what do you mean he burned so much money? Says the Gemara, Ema beshiv'im manesuri. Gemara says, not that he burned money, he burned all of the belongings, which was worth, this was the Nasi, this was worth 7,000 zuzim. And then the Gemara is going to now go through whether or not you kill the animal or you make the animal of the king lame, and so on and so forth. We're going to deal with this in just a moment. But before that, this Gemara, in Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Nun Bet, Gemara discusses a machloket Rabbi Meir and Chachamim in regards to how we kill a person that's chayav mita. The Gemara discusses the 4 ways that a person will be killed in chiyuvei mitat bedin, and one of them is, again, machloket, what the order is from the hardest one to the simplest one. The way we paskin is, of course, sekila, serefa, hereg, and chenek. So what is hereg? Hereg is beheading. The Gemara has a machloket, how do you do beheading? So Chachamim say, you behead just like the goyim behead, right? With a saif, with a sharp sword, and you do it standing, and they behead. Rabbi Yehuda says over there, no, we can't do that. Asur. Why? Because the goyim do that. Rabbi Yehuda says you do it with kofis, you do it with an axe from the back. Then Rabbi Yehuda himself acknowledges in the Gemara, says, I know that this is mita menuvelet. I know that this is considered a very disgraceful, disgusting way of killing a person with an axe. But I say, what can I do? The Torah says, don't follow the ways of the goyim. And the goyim kill like this. Right? And therefore, we can't. If they do it, we can't do it. And Chachamim say, no, it's not the problem of Darkei Mori, because Saif is written in the Chumash. Because Saif is said in the Torah, and whatever it says in the Torah is not a problem of Bechukotehem lo telechu. That's the Gemara there. Now, according to this, our Gemara, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, our Gemara should have said what? Should have just simply said, when the Gemara asked on Chachamim, Gemara should have answered, wait a second, it says in the Chumash that you could burn for the Melachim. So who cares if it's Chukah of the Goyim, not Chukah of the Goyim? I don't care what it is. Whatever it says in the Chumash, we could do. And over here, of course, a Navi, as we learned in the Gemara in Masechet Megillah, Daf Gimal, a Navi cannot bring a new halacha, and Navi Rashai lechadesh davar mata. And therefore, when it says in the Navi, Yirmiyahu, it means that it is a Torah concept that you could burn for the Melachim. And if you could burn for the Melachim, it's not Darkei Mori. Gamarnu. That should be the final answer of the Gemara. Why do you have to go through this whole thing of it's a halakha of goyim? It's not a halakha. It seems like if it would be a chukah of the goyim, even though that it says it in the Chumash, still would be asur. You with me? So Tosafot asks this question. The Ran asks this question. Many Rishonim deal with this. Tosafot says something different than the Ran. Tosafot says it depends on whether or not this is a chok of Avodah Zarah. If you have something that the goyim do because of their Avodah Zarah, even if it says it in the Chumash, still will be asur for us to do such a thing. Even though that the concept is mentioned, we, so to speak, were doing it first, right? We were doing this whole thing of burning for the king first. But if it becomes a chok of the goyim, a halacha of the goyim, then it becomes asur for us to do it. But if something is a minhag that the goyim have, but it's not a chok of Avodah Zarah, it's something that the goyim do, not related to the halachot of the Avodah Zarah, then it's only asur for us to follow it if you don't find it in the Chumash. But if you find it in the Torah, then we're not doing it because they're doing it. We're doing it because it says in the Chumash. That's what the Tosafot say. Right? Now, this becomes important because, for instance, the Safra writes, "Bechukotev lo telechu." What's the halacha? You can't go to the tiatriaot, the karkesaot, the estadeaot. You can't go to the stadiums, the theaters of the goy. The Safra says that's considered chukot akum. I mean, okay, that's not necessarily a chok of Avodah Zarah, but still will be asur. Now, how do you exactly explain this? The Ran, Ber Nisim, writes different than the Tosafot. He says, look, if something is a chok of Avodah Zarah, they do it clearly connected to Avodah Zarah, then it's asur. If it's not a chok of Avodah Zarah, it depends. If you're doing it because the goyim are doing it, then also is asur. But if you're doing it because it makes sense to do it, for instance, the Gemara says in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Samech Zayin, that anything of refuah, Abaye says over there, is mutar. If it's something that you do for a reason, it would no longer be darkei emori. I give you an example that we do every year ourselves, is upcoming. The minhag of kaparot on Erev Yom Kippur, right? Familiar? This was a minhag prior to the time of Rashba, of Rabbi Shlomo ben Adret, the Gdolei HaRishonim. And he fought tooth and nail to eradicate this minhag from the Jewish community, because he felt that this is darkei emori. Well, what do? You take a thing, you go around the head, and then you shech the chicken. What kind of minhag is that? The whole concept of kaparot, I mean, for us, is so pashut that this is mutar that we don't even think. Says the Rashba, what are you doing? This is not a korban. What exactly is this that you're doing? That you take a chicken, you go around your head and you shech the poor chicken and you throw it there? That's darkei emori. The goyim do these types of things, right? And therefore, asur isur deoraita. It's a biblical prohibition to do kaparot, says the Rashba. And he says he fought so hard to eradicate this. You know who paskins like the Rashba? Do you know? Maran Shulchan Aruch says in the Shulchan Aruch is asur to do kaparot. We do it. What's the pshat that we do this? And we're so orangutan in this. We're so strong. You know why? Because the Ari HaKadosh came, and Ari HaKadosh explained the reason behind why we do it. It's not because the goyim do it. It's not some weird thing that it has many reasons based on the sod, based on and even based on pshat, even not mysticism, just regular understanding of a person being chayav mitah for all the avirot that they did during the year, and then when you take this, it's like chenek, and then hereg. When you do the shchita, when you throw it, it's like skila. When you do the defeathering with the fire, it will be like serefa. So a person is saying, like, this should have happened to me. It's a part of the process of tshuva on Erev Yom Kippur to cleanse yourself in your thoughts from the avirot and so on. There's so therefore, once you have explanation of why you do it, it's not just a random thing that the goyim do and you follow, there's no longer darkei emori. So that's like one example of simple thing there could be a difference between the way the Rishonim understand this. Now,
I'm sorry. The reasoning that the Arya Kadosh used was not available to the Rashba at that time. How would he have reacted?
No, because the Arya Kadosh, the main things that he revealed was the Jewish mysticism of the Sodot, the secrets behind things that we do, and he has a lot to say on the Minhag of Kaparot. But he also explains a simple reason that this is a process of tshuva, not necessarily something that the goyim do. Now, Chacham Ovadia Yosef, for instance, to make this a little bit more real, has a tshuva in Chelek Vav of Yechavedat. I think it's Siman Samach, Nun or Samach. He discusses there, it's Nun, he discusses there the minhag that some people had to shech the chicken and put in the Bet HaKvarot, and they went to the Bet HaKvarot. Ben Ish Chai also has a similar thing, or they do, many Eastern countries, they have a related minhag that whenever they buy a new car, they do some kaparot, or when they do, they did different things for Ayin Hara. So, simply put, this should be really Darkei Mori. And Chacham has a longish tshuva there, discussing why in the world is this not Asur Doraita? Because it should be now. Arizal explained for Erev Yom Kippur maybe, but with this thing of every glass that breaks in the house, you go and do a kaparot, or the minhag that they had in the Bet HaKvarot and the Tarnagolet putting in the house, and so. What is that exactly based on? And he tries very hard to find smuchim for this, and at the end, Mikaradin, he's matir this. But again, the core concept of following something that the goyim do, or even don't do, well, let me explain this. There's machloket achronim, whether or not the isur of Darkei Mori is when you do something, like the goyim do, or even if you refrain from doing something, because the goyim appear like that, even though that you're not doing anything, that still will be Darkei. What's the good nafkamina for this? Not wearing a kippah, right? Can you walk around without the kippah? Now, there is, of course, a halacha that you can't say tefillah, you can't say brachot, right? As the Shulchan Aruch says in Siman Tzadi Aleph of Shulchan Aruch, it's asur to mention Hashem's name without it, and enter a shul without. But not wearing a kippah when you appear in the public, is that the way of goyim, or is that not the way of goyim? Now, the Trumat Adeshin writes that that's asur Darkei Mori. It's asur because of Darkei Mori. Goyim do that, you're not allowed to do. You're not doing anything. You're just not doing something that the Jews do, and you appear like the goyim without doing anything. And Trumat says the Marshal, who was the contemporary of Maran Shulchan Aruch, he was one of the Gdolei Ashkenazim in the time of the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah in Ashkenaz. In his Tshuvot of Marshal Siman Ayin Bet, he writes, not like the Turban, just what Darkei Mori? I'm not doing anything, and therefore it's mutar. Darkei Mori is when you do a maaseh like the goyim. Over here, not doing anything. The Taz, on the other hand, in Siman Het in Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, disagrees with this. He says, no, absolutely asur. You walk without the kippah, 2023, asur doraita. Why asur? You're like the goyim, right? Moshe Feinstein, in Yoredeah, in Chelek Aleph of Igrot Moshe in Yoredeah, he disagrees with that assertion. Even though that he himself writes a very interesting tshuva later on in life, in Orach Chaim Chelek Dalit of Igrot Moshe, he writes that if you davened without having a kippah, you forgot. You davened without a kippah on your head, you have to go back and daven again. And that doesn't count. Even the tefillah that you daven doesn't count as a tefillah. But nevertheless, when it comes to Darkei Mori, it's not Darkei Mori. To walk without the kippah is not Darkei Mori, right? Especially because he says nowadays it's not a pagan thing. They go and do it because they're comfortable to do it like that. They're comfortable. But it says when it comes to tefillah, the goyim are makpid. It's a chok of the goyim. You go to the church, and you want to daven there with your hat, that's a no-go. You have to take off your hat. It's considered disrespect. So it's darkei mori to daven without a kippah. And therefore, even if you did it b'shogeg, even if you did it not realizing that you're not wearing a kippah, says Rabbi Shvaisen, you have to daven again. But regularly in the street, you go without the kippah, that's darkei mori. Says Rabbi Moshe, that's not darkei mori, because all the goyim do it for comfort reasons. People are hot, people are this, they don't want to go with the kippah, and therefore, or without a hat. Therefore, they go without kisurosh. Has nothing to do nowadays with religion anymore. Maybe back in the day it had something to do with it. Nowadays, but when you go to the place of prayer, by the goyim, their prayer with a head covering is a no-go. They take it off bedavka for prayer, and therefore, if you did it without a head covering, so it comes out a very interesting thing. It comes out halachically. In the shul, and mentioning Hashem's name, aside from Siman Tzadi Aleph, that's asur to mention an azkara, name of Hashem, without the kisirosh, and it's asur to come in the Bet Knesset when you have the Aron and the Sefer Torah. It's asur to come without the kippah. Aside from that, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, it's a isur d'oraita to do it because of chukot hakum. And if you daven without the kisirosh, then you'll still be in trouble for having done chukot hakum. You'll say your tefillah, you have to daven again. Okay. So that's that. So let's quickly now do a few more lines, and then we come back to this in some details of Chukot Hakum, as the Gemara is going to discuss them in a few lines from now. Says the Gemara. So you want to say that the only thing that you burn is the bed and the personal belongings? That's not true. Says the Gemara. V'hatanya, 3 lines up. Okrina la melachim ve'en bo mishum darkei mori. You are oker the behema of a goy, of a king, right? You had the horse that the king rode on, and you take and you cut the sinews of the back 2 feet, and this way nobody could ride on it anymore. So this way, and what's the sugya that we have to talk about when it comes to this? Hurting animals, Sar Bala Haim. Gemara says in Masechet Bava Metzia, Daf Lamed Bet and Lamed Gimel, and Maskana of the Gemara there is that Sar Bala Haim is a Isur Deoraita. Sar Bala Haim is a Isur Deoraita. So how in the world can you do this? The simple answer would be because if you're doing it for kavod of a king, it's not for no reason, it will be mutar, right? We shall come back to this in a major way later on in the Gemara. So says the Gemara. So hold on to that, maybe even, again, depending on what we're going to do, if we're going to quickly go through this dapim that you did and just discuss the halachot, maybe we'll actually discuss that tomorrow or the day after. But nevertheless, keep that in mind, that here we say take a beautiful horse and you basically lame them, hurting them forever. Every step that they take is going to be hurtful from now on. And that seems to be mutar. Okrina la melachim. You could do that for a king. It's not considered darkei mori. Amar Papa says, Sus sherachav alav ubehemat teora lo. Mara says, well, you see from here, just the sus, a animal that you ride on, but it seems like nothing else. So you have the bed, the personal belongings, and now we have a ride of the king. But nothing else, says Papa. Behemat teora lo. V'hatanya. Ikur sheyesh bat terefa asur v'she'en bat terefa mutar. If you do ikur, this that we just mentioned right now, if it's in a way that it makes the behemah taref, then taref is something you cannot eat because it dies. It's unhealthy. It's machloket, a large machloket. What exactly taref is? Ikur only is mutar when you're not making the behemah taref. It's asur to make a behemah taref, just like. It's asur to eat a taref, it's also asur to make a taref. And says the Gemara, you see from that, ve'ezehu ikur she'en ba taref, hamenasher parsotav min ha'arkuva ulmata. You see, when you do, you cut a leg of an animal from arkuva ulmata, from their they have 3. It's not like a human being that has 2 bones in the leg. They have 3. So arkuva is a little bit different than the way we will refer to it. So you cut it from below that, that's mutar, says the Gemara. So says Gemara, Tir Gemara Papa be'egla hamoshechet bekara. So you see from this that even if you have a kosher animal, it's asur to make it terefa. So you see that even a kosher animal of the king, you cut the. So is that even the king has so many thousands of flock, and you got to go and kill all of them? Poor things. The Gemara says no. Papa said this is a cow that would carry the carriage of the king. You can't ride a horse always. Sometimes you're in a place that you need a strong animal to carry the carriage. And if you used a cow, a strong ox for this, so then that would be something that you would cut their sinews just like the horse you would do, just because that would be considered a keli tashmish, something that the king rode on. An extension of the ride would be a ox that carries that, and therefore that would be asur. But any other thing will be mutar. Now you're left to deal with the sar ba'alachayim over here and go back to the darkei mori, which Bezat Hashem will do in the days to come. Chazak u'Baruch.